Everybody has a chart. The calculations are based in astrology. Your chart is composed of these energies, these gene keys.
The gene keys are a series of transformational experiential pathways that lead to higher states of consciousness.
Richard Rudd is the founder, creator of gene keys.
My view through DNA is a poet's eye, and that's what the gene keys is. It's a poet's eye through the structure of our biology, of our, quintessence of our biology.
Gene keys is a combination of astrology, human design, but then it also includes epigenetics and I Ching. It's a string of energy, and then there's different layers to it. You have a shadow frequency, you have the gift frequency, and you have what he calls the city. The gene keys is it's a living organism. The possibilities of the ways that the genes or the frequencies, the gifts can manifest through you is like endless. We just don't know. Wow. And that's part of the journey, and like the adventure of it is just seeing like how it can show up and how it can live out through us.
Welcome everyone to the Eons Ahead podcast. I'm your host, Alex Wolfe. And on the show, we like to have deep, intimate conversations with amazing people that are eons ahead. But what does it mean to be eons ahead? Well, it means they're ahead of their time and they see things other people don't see, and they're able to communicate those visions to the world and manifest it into reality, making a positive impact for humanity. They're doing things that other people are not doing, which I love. They're trailblazers, they're pioneers, they're conscious leaders. And our guest today definitely qualifies. Her name is Summer Phoenix. Summer is a spiritual intuitive guide that uses astrology, gene keys, and subconscious mind rewiring to help people authentically align to their unique essence. She helps people harmonize their soul and identity and guides them to clarity and awareness of who they really are. She believes we all have different recipes to our gifts and our genius, and she helps you embody that from within. Summer and I work very closely together, and she means a lot to me, and I'm super happy to have her here on the show. She is definitely eons ahead, and she's here today. Summer Phoenix.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so for the viewers that don't know, we work closely together at Eons, and you help me out so much. And I've said it in meetings before that you're the yin to my yang, and I think one time I even said you're the yang to my yin, and you're like, no, boss, that's not it. And that's why I love you. That's why I have you on the team, is to keep me in check and help keep me in the guardrails of on this mission that we're on together. Mm-hmm. And you're so intuitive. That's something that keeps getting uncovered more and more as time goes on. So how do you balance being such like an effective doer, because you're great at getting stuff done, and having this intuitive spiritual gift that you clearly have?
That's a great question. I think it takes a lot of practice. Like it takes a lot of energy to learn how to balance it, because it's not always balanced. When you're like, how do you balance it? I don't always.
Oh. Well, you do a good job of showing like you do.
Yeah. So I can begin to wrap astrology right into this.
Yeah, sure.
So in your astrology chart, you have a south node and a north node, right? And the north node shows you the direction your soul is going in this lifetime and kind of the archetype that you're meant to embody in this lifetime. And the south node is like what you've mastered in a past life or in your childhood, that you're just kind of letting go of those traits. And the one that I'm stepping into is the archetype of Libra. And Libra is all about balance.
Ah, cool.
So balance as an intention has been very alive in my life for the past decade. So what do I do to do that? I don't really know. It's kind of trial and error.
I see.
I really live like a trial and error lifestyle, but what happens when you keep that intention of balance and bringing it back to like a somatic awareness and just being able to observe your life, like, okay, where am I out of balance? Where is it balanced? And sometimes I don't really realize the intuition. Like it just gets revealed. And oftentimes I laugh. I'm like, what is this even good for? Like, what's the use of this intuition that I have? Because if I just see clearly what already is, now what?
Sure.
So what?
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's very interesting to say that. So in your trial and error methodology of how you figure this kind of stuff out. So what do? You try something. If you get like a weird feeling, or if it just doesn't work out the way that you might want it to work out, or can you give us an example of that, how you've used that recently?
Mine, definitely shows up in, my intuition shows up in feelings, and sometimes like insight. So, or like thoughts. And I'll think that they're my thoughts. And then I hear, like what happened with us this week.
Right.
You like shared something on the call. I'm like, I was just thinking that yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, was it my thought or was it his thought? It doesn't matter. It's like we all have these antennas to the ethers, and like it's all connected. That's how I see it. It's like we got the ethers and we have antennas, and it's bound to drop into one person's mind and maybe multiple. And to me, it's a reminder of how connected I am to things. And it makes me feel connected to life and makes me trust more. But when it comes to using it with clients, sometimes I'm off, on my feelings, and I try to describe something to somebody and they're like, no, that's not how it is. And it's just like, okay, and you keep kind of like seeking and searching for like pockets of energy, right? The pockets of the feeling, and trying to like articulate, like maybe I feel it in my gut or maybe I feel it in my head. And I try to make it relatable to the other person. And it helps people feel seen, feel understood. And I think the key is connection.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how long have you been into astrology?
About a decade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
How'd you get into it?
It was kind of random. So I grew up with very spiritual parents. Clearly, my real name is Summer Phoenix, right? Like they're total hippies.
Yeah, I've met your dad. He's awesome.
Yeah. And my mom's like a Reiki master. I was getting tarot readings and aura readings when I was like 6.
Wow.
Right. So just been around it a lot. But then I did that thing when I was like a teenager where I rebelled and I went into religion, Christianity, and was like preaching to my parents, and they were like, whatever, like the whole thing. But as I got older and I started to realize how much like anxiety, and I was struggling with like mental illness, and I got this hunch to cut out medication. I got the hunch to try yoga, right? All these gut feelings, like get into herbal medicine, kind of reintroduce that lifestyle back. And I trying to remember exactly how it all happened, but I think that I just was on Instagram, right? Instagram was starting to get bigger at this time, and like coaches were coming online, and I wanted an astrology reading myself, and I really connected with this woman, lived in Hawaii, and so I bought one just out of sheer curiosity. But what happened was this stranger knew me better than like my partner at the time did, who I lived with, or that my mom did. Like I felt so seen and so understood. There was no denying like the wisdom in astrology. And then I decided that I wanted to share that with everybody, and just natural curiosity, I became obsessed with it. And then yeah.
And do you use it every day in your daily practice with your friends and family and stuff, or how often does it come up?
Yeah, so I found myself really being drawn to like the archetype and the stories inside of astrology. So I love to psychoanalyze. I love to study people. And that's kind of how I utilize it.
When you say the story and the archetype, what do you mean by that?
So there's like 12 archetypes in astrology. And they all have like a message. And they
like
all,
Aries, Taurus, Gemini.
Yeah, they represent like these different traits of life. And just kind of understanding each archetype and being able to embody like the medicine that's within the archetype. Is how I use it, as well as with the planets. So the planets have an archetype, or I just call it like a spirit. So when I remember when I first began to learn astrology, I didn't pick up a book. I'm not a book person. I did a couple YouTube videos, but really just learned like with people, and then I would connect with the spirit of a planet. So I'd be like, okay, for the next month, Pluto, show me you. Show me how you operate and how you work. And then I would just see it kind of pop up in my life, begin to put in the patterns. Like there's so much of astrology is actually based in numbers, and then there's storytelling.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you can pick up on the patterns, get to know the archetypes. That's how I see myself utilizing it most. With transits, of course, like I follow the moon. But it becomes a little bit effortless after a while. You're like, oh, of course I'm feeling this way, and the moon is in Scorpio.
Right. Yeah. So for like the listeners that may be newer to astrology, like I'll be the first to admit it. I'm a believer in astrology. I had a reading when I was like 17 or 18 years old. My mom used to have a restaurant, and on Monday nights, which were like the slowest night of the week, she decided to do this thing called Mystic Mondays.
Cool.
And she would have psychics in and astrology readers and all this kind of stuff. And that's when I was like, yeah, let me try this out. I was skeptic, but a little bit open-minded.
Yeah.
And I got a reading. And it, like you said, it was so accurate. And they knew so many things about me. They knew that, I was becoming a pilot at the time, and they talked about flying and all these little cool things. And anyway, it really landed for me. And then I began studying astrology as well. And I always used it in my romantic relationships for sure, and I felt it was very much a thing. So for the people that are more skeptical or newer to it, it's obviously very deep, right? It's a lot more than just, oh, you're an Aries, you're this, or you're a Capricorn, you're like this, because then people are like, oh, my sister's a Capricorn and I'm a Capricorn and we're so different, right? And then because there's many layers to it, right? There's the sun sign, there's the moon sign, there's the rising sign, and what else is there besides those things?
So a birth chart is literally just like a snapshot of the sky the minute you were born.
Wow.
And they actually log the minute that you were born by the first breath you take.
Wow.
Which I think is just a really beautiful
That's cool.
thing
When the spirit comes in. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool.
Connection. So it's just literally a snapshot of the sky from like, okay, you're born, say I was born in Austin, Texas. It was like, what did the sky look like? Where were all the planets aligned with the certain constellations in that minute? So that's what you're looking at in the birth chart. It's like, okay, where was Pluto? Where was Neptune, Uranus, all of the planets in the solar system? And then there's even asteroids too that are calculated that you can begin to get into as well.
Cool.
One thing with skeptics, and this just goes for everybody as well, astrology, I don't believe astrology is for everybody. So
what do you mean by that?
So I have a friend right now who he doesn't quite like jive with astrology. Like it just doesn't click for him. He doesn't get anything from it. But then we talk about gene keys and it's like mind-blowing, life-changing. So it's a modality and it's optional. I feel like if people don't feel drawn to it, connected to it, or curious about it, like they want to move past their skepticism, it's like, don't.
Yeah. Right.
You don't have
It's not
to.
for them. It doesn't mean that it's not real or applicable. It just doesn't, it's just not interesting to them. And there might be another modality, like you said, gene keys, or human design,
right?
That is a more aligned with what their belief system is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And it is interesting too, to not tie so much of the belief system into like astrology, because you could just look at it from a purely like mathematical point in like astronomy, right? Just seeing like, oh, the planet was aligned with this constellation, like they've named the constellations, and then you can get into understanding like the Greek mythology portion of it. But that's another thing, is that astrology was like its own thing, and then the Greeks kind of took it over from the Egyptians, stole it, and turned it into what we know now as like Western astrology.
Interesting.
So there's like Vedic astrology.
Right.
You can even get into Chinese astrology, like, and it's fun.
Tibetan. I think I had a Tibetan reading one time. It was pretty weird.
Right? There's just so many different ways to get into it, and I kind of like learning a little bit about each and then seeing like the commonalities, right? Kind of get like an omniscient point of view of it all.
Right. Well, like you said, it's so vast and it's so complex, but the human experience is very vast and complex, right? So to me, it adds up. It's like, it's complicated. It's not super simple. And this is a way to try to help simplify things by tapping into the map of the sky or the stars, that's always there, always shining down on us, no matter what. And I remember reading a quote when I was younger that really landed for me about astrology. And I think it was by JP Morgan Chase or one of these big billionaires. And he was said, millionaires don't use astrology, but billionaires do.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, what does he mean by that? And it's like these billionaires would actually map out their days and months and big deals all around astrology, which was super cool.
Yeah.
So do you take that into effect when you're planning your trips or your business or your anything like that?
Yeah. So that is an area that I desire to get better at. I try to I'm like, oh, it's not going to affect me that much. I'm still that skeptical. I still have that skeptical kind of like whatever part of me as well, even though I'm so immersed in the understanding of it. And it was actually during the eclipse that I decided to take a vacation.
Oh, right.
And during a Mercury retrograde, I also launched a group program, and things were just going to shit left and right. We had things happen at Eons, 2 bots come in,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
it's like, of course, like it's Mercury retrograde, like
Right.
this stuff would happen. And with, if you know it beforehand, it does help you be a little bit more prepared for it or plan more strategically.
Right.
So I highly recommend people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even though I'm not as practiced, I could be better.
Yeah,
about
well,
it.
it's a practice, you know,
Yeah.
and you're figuring it out, trial and error, and we're always getting better at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question for you: have you heard of this thing with astrology that they say there's actually 13 signs? What's the scoop with that? What's going on with that? Is that a conspiracy theory, or is there some truth to that, or what does Summer Phoenix say about that?
So before the Greeks took over astrology, there were 13 signs, and we
Wow.
had the 13-month calendar.
Wow.
But when the Greeks took it over, they changed it. And I have heard this story like once of why they changed it, and they named certain months after like just very kind of surface level things that were happening in their society at the time, you know? So like after a certain like king or like a party, and because there's New Year's Eve, right? And it's, some people will say, no, the New Year's happens on Aries season. the
That's
first
right.
of
Yeah,
Aries
and
season.
March 20th or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Greeks turned it into January 1st because I think of, and I could just totally be butchering this, but if I remember correctly, it's like a certain king like just wanted to celebrate his day, and that's what they named January after his name. And he kind of just like took it over and changed it.
Just ran with it.
Yeah, for the art of it, right? It was like, okay, they literally created that just to party.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So our calendar has been pretty manipulated then
Yes.
over the time.
Yeah. Yep. And it
Interesting.
impacted astrology. So if you go back to the OG, there are 13 signs, 13-month calendar.
So would that change our current sign? Like, does that mean I would be a different sign under that calendar?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And even like in Vedic astrology, so they look at it from a sidereal calculation where Western is tropical. And what that means is there's a different starting point, a viewpoint. So some like tropical looks at it from Earth out, where I believe sidereal looks at it from the sun out, and you have like an Earth sign, and it shifts things. So in sidereal, you are potentially more times than not, it's worth 30 days ahead in Western. So in Western, my sun sign falls into Cancer, but in Vedic astrology, it's Gemini.
Right.
And it completely changes it, where it looks like my chart in Western is all water and earth. And then in Vedic, it's air and fire.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I also had a Vedic astrology reading by a lovely lady here in Austin named Amaya Shiva, great woman. And that reading was one of the most amazing readings I ever had, you know, and but it was Vedic, you know, and I was like, well, what do you mean? There's Vedic and then there's Western astrology. So I'm wondering if you're saying like the Greeks came and they changed the calendar and they changed it around, and, you know, our matrix system is really based on the calendar. So I wonder if our astrology in the West here is based around, you know, more of like our life in the matrix.
Yeah.
And then our Vedic or these other astrologies are more based around our spiritual self or our higher self or
A different matrix.
a different matrix
That's
altogether.
exactly how I see it. I'm like, oh, we're just playing into this matrix that we've created. Like, and I contemplated for a while, like coming back to this trial and error thing. Like, I love to experiment. And so instead of contemplating and living life through the lens of my Western chart, I began to live it through my Vedic chart.
Right.
Because after my Vedic reading, I was like, shit. There were some similarities. There were a lot of similarities, especially with like my soul lessons, but there were just certain things that just changed a little bit. And I was like, what if I live life through this lens instead and begin to like, would it actually create a different timeline for me, a different lifestyle? Like, what would happen? And I did have probably about 6 months of my astrology career where I would, when people would ask me for a reading, I'd give them their Vedic reading, whether they knew it or not. I would just read it their Vedic chart.
Wow.
Yeah. I went a little hardcore and was like, Vedic only.
Vedic only.
And now I'm just like, I have some people who are like, I want to read my sidereal chart. And then some people who want to do the Western. And you can kind of feel like what feels like more accurate for them. Or sometimes I look at both charts and then give them a reading.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's say you were going to get into a friendship or even more so a romantic relationship. And let's say this is a hypothetical, but well, I'll just ask it directly first. Would you look at their chart before you went on the first date, or would you want to like get a sense of who they are on the first or second date and then dive into the chart?
Yeah, I like to wait. Especially because I know that we are all susceptible to being biased. Right. From our past experiences, especially when I think I know so much about astrology, then I think I like already know that person. And I wait. I try actually not to use it so much in my relationships now.
Oh, interesting.
But I find that that was actually one of the most beautiful things that I loved about astrology was how it helped me to understand and appreciate somebody else's differences. Because I've, for a very long time, lived life like, why aren't people more like me?
Right.
You know? And it was just totally cutting off my ability to experience intimacy and grow like a genuine relationship. And astrology kind of helped me see the beauty in different traits in other people. So that's what I love using it for, to help me like see like, oh, that person's going to operate like this. They're going to speak like this. Like they're going to have this type of processing. That's beautiful for them. You know, how can I support their nature and still hold my own at the same time? Because I think that's when you can really see compatibility or not.
Wonderful.
When you can have that discernment, like I see yours, I see me, and then you have more empathy and understanding of how to navigate the relationship and kind of see what place they have in your life.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I think that's very mature. Let's say, hypothetically, let's say you met this gentleman and he was amazing, you know, like he's checking off all the boxes. You feel a connection with him emotionally, physically, spiritually. And then you're like, yeah, I don't want to see the chart, you know? And then time goes on and you guys are still dating. Things are going great. And then you look at the chart and the chart is a nightmare for you. Like, it's just really like, couldn't be worse of a chart. What would you do in that situation?
I've had that kind of happen, not to an extreme, but where I've looked at it and I've been like,
yeah,
like shit, the fear comes through.
Right.
That's what happens. It's like what you fear about that certain archetype in its shadow, right?
Yes.
So then it's about taking like clear discernment with that person.
Yeah.
Are they living in their gifts? Like, where are they at with the development of that archetype? Because if it's just two sides of the same coin, like what kind of, you know, where are they at with it? And I would actually, if that happened, I would probably take that and use it to ask that person questions. So I won't lie, like I'm not a huge fan of Pisces energy. Like they're known to be slippery.
Yeah.
And
wishy-washy,
cheaters, not stable. Like my Capricorn moon is like, make it fucking grounded, you know? And, you know, one of my favorite relationships, he was a Pisces.
There you go.
Yeah. But
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I could relate. I had, you know, my toxic relationship when I was younger was a young Gemini young lady, and that was a nightmare. You know, that was one that like went through all the all the lessons, and it was pretty toxic, and it brought out sides of both of us that were not pretty. And after that relationship, I said, I'll never date a Gemini again. I got to know them so well, and I was like, yeah, we just don't align. And that's pretty much what astrology says with Taurus and Gemini, relatively. And obviously there's exceptions.
Right.
So I went for the rest of my 30s. And if I met a girl and she was a Gemini, I was pretty much auto out. I was like, oh, well, and I was really that strict. You know me, I'm a Taurus, so I'm very hard-headed. I definitely align with that. And then I met a wonderful woman who was a Gemini, and I gave it a shot. I was like, wow, this lady's exceptional, and I gave it a shot. And it was actually one of the smoothest, most easygoing relationships that I ever had. So it's very much like anything can happen there. And there's definitely certain traits that are in there, but I think that it's all layers of a cake, and it could just be like, okay, this is one layer of the cake. And then, human design is another layer of the cake. And then we have gene keys, which is like maybe the inside of the cake or something. Yeah. Let's get into gene keys, because this is something that's very new to me. So I know it's really complex and you could spend hours and hours and hours, but let's try to simplify it for myself and break out the crayons here and just really try to break it down.
And that's what I love doing. Like Richard Rudd is the founder, creator of Gene Keys, and he's so poetic. He's absolutely a guru. And you can tell when he speaks about it and like when you read his writing, it's just like, wow.
Yeah, he's tapped in.
Yes. So, and I love making it really simple because I find it to be such an amazing tool to have. So Gene Keys is a combination of astrology, human design. He actually learned under the founder of human design.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he was one of his students.
Cool.
Yeah, so he talks a little bit about that and how it has similarities and the crossover with integrations. But then it also includes epigenetics and I Ching, which the epigenetics part actually intrigues me the most. I'm a huge fan of epigenetics already. It was before I got into my spiritual path, it was my health path. It's like getting the vessel clean, and then you start to open up and feel things differently.
Right. For the people that might not know, what's a simple definition for epigenetics?
Epigenetics is that your DNA can shift and change based on your environment. So that means your physical environment, the food you're eating, and the thoughts you're thinking. Right.
So true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what Gene Keys kind of does is it shows you how we have, this gets a little nerdy, but within our DNA lies, we could call them codes, like higher frequencies that can come online, but that are just dormant because so many people are still living in a state of survival, right? Wow. Why we see so many things like famine, war.
Right.
But if we can actively shift our frequency, raise our vibration, learn how to alchemize out of those survival mechanisms, we can turn online these higher frequencies.
Wow.
Yes.
Tell me more. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So everybody has a chart, right? It's calculated. The calculations are based in astrology. So based off your birth time, date, and all that goody stuff. And your chart is composed of these energies, these gene keys. So there's 64 gene keys, and you have probably 11 of them. Sometimes they repeat so fluidly. Generally people have 11 different gene keys. Each gene key composes is like, it's a string of energy, and then there's different layers to it, right? Different levels. So it's the same string of energy, but you have a shadow frequency, you have the gift frequency, and you have what he calls the siddhi.
The siddhi.
Siddhi is a Sanskrit word.
Oh.
Spelled Siddhi.
Oh, I see. Not like the metropolitan city.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. He says, he's like, I couldn't find an English word that
encompasses what this is.
Exactly.
So it's shadow, gift, and then siddhi, and this is like your DNA as the frequency rises is changing into this super DNA.
Yes.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, like he talks about like the rainbow body.
Wow.
Where people are being fueled by the sun.
Yeah.
They don't need food as much. Right. That's big picture, long-term vision if this stuff really...
Higher state of consciousness.
Exactly. But he really balances out, and he's like, don't make that your goal.
Why
Like,
not?
don't make that the goal, because it's about the journey.
It's about the journey.
It's about the journey.
Of course, always.
Yeah, he's like, if you go at it this way of like, we need to fix humanity, and
Right.
like
It's a different
change all
mindset.
these things, yes, it can become very restrictive.
For sure.
And the Gene Keys is this, it's a living organism. So the possibilities of the ways that the genes or the frequencies, the gifts can manifest through you is like endless. We just don't know.
Wow.
And that's part of the journey, and like the adventure of it is just seeing like how it can show up and how it can live out through us.
Wow. So cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the city means the highest ascended state.
Mm.
It's like where oneness is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just
Cool.
the divine essence.
Wow.
So to give an example of what one looks like.
Yeah, please.
So let's use gene key 48. It's my purpose sphere.
Mhm.
And the shadow frequency of this gene is inadequacy. And then the gift is resourcefulness. And the city is wisdom.
Mm.
And so it's about finding those pockets, those very deep-seated, dark, sometimes like nauseating pockets of the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, finding where inadequacy still lives within my my operating system.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And creating spaces, creating the opportunity through pauses, through introspection, through inquiry and curiosity of myself to find what resourcefulness would feel like.
Mm.
What it feels like for me to move out of that maybe autopilot of
Mhm.
inadequacy
Mm.
and doing the pause, because we can do that as humans. We
For
can
sure.
like consciously take a pause.
Yeah.
And like we have authority over like consciousness in ways that animals don't, right? Like that's what differentiates us between animals.
Right. Yeah. The choice, the consciousness of choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's finding those pockets of resourcefulness, and it's Gene Keys is literally all energy work. So that's another thing that people get tripped up, and they're like, give me an example.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, listen, I could try to give you an example, but you're going to see shifts when you tap into how the energy lives in you and how it lives in your body,
Right.
which is why I bring in the somatic part of
Yeah.
it in my practice and in my coaching containers.
What do you mean by that when you say you bring in the somatic part of it?
Yeah. So how the structure looks is we nerd out, we learn all the cool stuff for 1 week, and then the next week I walk people through a somatic exercise where they can actually build a connection and attunement with the frequency through their body.
Mm. So they feel it. They embody it.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, you know, bring in your shadow, okay, inadequacy.
Mhm.
And I just have them kind of sit with that feeling for a while and like maybe visualize the word inadequacy or begin to like undress the word inadequacy to get to the core of what it feels like. And then you let your body talk.
Mm.
It's like, what does your body want to do when it's feeling inadequate?
Mhm.
Maybe it wants to get small or like wants to curl up or crawl out of its skin. And you're just building the awareness of what happens in the body
Mhm.
so that you can begin to notice it when you're living your life.
Mhm.
But then also to build a capacity just to be with that experience.
Mhm.
So what happens a lot with shadow work and through gene keys is that we want to avoid the shadow. We want to repress it.
Mhm.
No, I'm not that shadow. I'm not a shadowy person. I'm love and light, you know?
Right.
I don't experience that. But
Sure.
what happens when we suppress it is we still end up resonating at it. It's still there.
It's still there. And
Yeah.
then it doesn't like creep its way back into our life somehow? Or
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Oh,
That's what I thought.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just like totally unconscious operating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, like doesn't matter how hard you try to repress it.
Right.
Like it either comes out passive aggressively or it just will show itself in all these like creative, cute little survival ways.
Right.
That's all the shadow is like, this is my safe zone. This is how I've learned to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's about creating a safety also to be out of the shadows
Mm.
and like feeling safe to be in the gift.
Mhm.
Because that can be new for people. Like they're used to feeling in their shadows,
Right.
looking down on themselves, being hard on themselves. Like
Sure.
it's like, and it feels uncomfortable for them to shift out of that and be in the gift.
Mm. There's a lot of growth there, right? It's an identity shift, really.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
wow, that's fascinating. So how do what are some practices or what are some tips or tricks that you can share with the audience? Like, I guess they would start off by getting the knowledge, figuring out what is your shadow tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could be aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then once someone has the awareness of that, and then they have they get the awareness of what their gift is next. Is that pretty much the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And then how would one go to start to embody more of their gifts? And what happens to this shadow? Do they just leave it be and it's like, all right, I've morphed into the gift, or is it like an integration process? Or can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's like that classic analogy of peeling back the layers of the onion. Like you'll see the shadow play out in one part of your life, and you're like, oh shit, like, okay, cool. Let me turn on the gift. And then the next week, it's like, oh, fuck, there it is again, but it showed up this way. Okay, let me turn on the gift. Like, there's not like a linear path with it.
Sure.
And it's not a one and done.
Right.
It's like...
It's continual.
Yeah. And
man, I could relate a lot to this stuff just by you talking about it. It's really interesting.
That's what makes it a living organism. Right. It's just, it's a living, breathing thing that moves through us, right?
Yeah.
Something that I always encourage people to tap back into is just that introspection question of how does this energy already show up in my life? Mm-hmm. Because what can happen when we learn something new, we're like seeking in the outside to like see it, to understand it. Like, oh, I don't understand this. Let me learn more about it. Mm-hmm. Can be helpful. I've done that. I'm very third eye heavy, you know, but the real shifts begin when we can get back into the body and ground internal. It. Yeah. Yep.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. As within, so without.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone, you know, they call this a silly question, but do you know anyone or many people that are living in the city state? Or is this like a very rare, like enlightened being, or is there, you know, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I'm going to take it back to an analogy of how the three kind of operate together, and then talk a little bit about maybe what experiencing the city is like. Mm. So the shadow can be seen as the seed. The gift is like the sprout or the stem that comes out of the seed. Mm-hmm. And the city would be the flower.
The flower.
Yep.
Yeah, makes sense.
So one thing to always remember is that you can't get to the flower without that seed. Mm-hmm. And also you don't need to do anything to the seed to get it to turn to a rose. Like that seed is already predestined to become a rose. Cool. It's about creating the environment so that the rose can bloom. Space, understanding the nutrients it needs. Like space is huge.
Yeah,
like
it's clutch.
Forgot to ask you if I could swear.
Yeah, you
can
swear.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fucking
just don't bang
huge.
the table.
Yeah. Cool.
Unless you really have to, but then you better be important.
Okay. It's about so internal space is huge. Like because what happens in the shadows is that people are operating on autopilot, and so that's that pause, creating an internal sense of yin. That's what I call it. Internal sense of yin. Mm-hmm. Create that
like
space.
Peace.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stillness. A space for something new to come through, right? That's how like you can hop out of that autopilot,
totally
create a new timeline, new pathway for yourself in the gift frequency. But how I kind of see it is that we only consciously play in the shadow and the gift frequency, and what happens naturally is just moments of the city. Like we just get to experience kind of flashes of it, slivers of it. Are people living mainly in their cities? Maybe, maybe monks and people who live like a life totally devoted to that, right? Like some people go hardcore in their philosophies, and like you see it in Eastern cultures a lot. Like I studied this,
like a Buddhist monk or something might be in the Siddhic state.
Yeah, I studied a certain yoga philosophy of agoras, I believe is what their tribe was called. And these people believed in oneness so much that they would eat trash and see it as food. There was
no separation.
No separation at all.
Right.
Those people were highly devoted. They also did a lot of other creepy things. And I started to get really weird dreams after reading the book. I was like, I got to put this stuff down.
I bet,
yeah. But as far as like being able to even notice it, I think takes a certain openness to be able to see and feel somebody in the city. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'm like, do I have the eye or the insight or the intuition to be able to see and feel somebody in that?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's fascinating when you put it like that, because that means it could be somebody that you wouldn't even expect is just transcended this matrix and, totally living free to their own gifts and dreams, and it has nothing to do with what society might think. At first what I was thinking about, I was like, someone in this city, is it like a famous leader or something like that, that I could think of. But now the way you're saying it, I'm thinking it's more like maybe it's just someone that's totally transcended the matrix world, and they're just living completely free in their mind and their body, and maybe eating weird stuff or not, but there's very little separation between them and oneness of life.
Yeah. Yes.
Pretty cool.
Like being in your gifts doesn't equate to a certain lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Like the shittiest people living in survival can be a millionaire.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that. The times I look back on my life, some of the times that I made the most money, I was not necessarily a good person. I was really selfish. So I could understand. It's let's talk about a bit more about the gifts, because this seems like this is where we're going, in this conscious path that we're on, and we still have our shadows. They keep coming back every once in a while, and now we're shifting into the gifts. Do you know anything about my gifts? Did you ever look up my gene keys? Oh, do you want to share it all? Or
it's been a while since I've peeked at yours. I think that one that I interact with a lot because we work together is your IQ sphere. So the IQ is clearly your mental intelligence. Right. There's EQ, emotional intelligence, and your SQ, your soul's intelligence.
Soul.
Cool. Yeah. It's the heart of the chart.
That's cool.
It's the first 7 years you were born.
Oh.
So like the soul is learning how to operate inside of the physical body.
Wow.
It's a transcendent one to contemplate. I really adore it. It's very tender. But the IQ is actually developed between ages 14 and 21. A little bit different, people are really starting to get into partying, drugs, or they have
mischief, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Like we're experiencing freedom for the first time in our lives generally, really defining who we are. But it's your mental intelligence, but it's also I found to be a huge hub for creativity. So it's where we become narrow-minded and what the frequencies that help us become open-minded. So the IQ shadow is going to make you more narrow-minded. And again, if we're in our shadows, it's not because we're being a bad person. It's because we've found a state of surviving there. It's literally just survival. It's not in integrity, out of integrity, moral. It's not a moral compass. It's, am I in survival, or am I transcended from that more primal part of myself? Which makes us give up kind of a lot of things, and it can be a little, you're like, no, I don't want to give up that thing. There's so much comfort and pleasure that comes from it.
Right.
And then the gift frequency is what's going to help open up your mind, which I believe opens us up to higher intelligence, which is where the creativity can come through. So your IQ shadow, and this is, I adore this gene key. I have some really close friends that start life's work, but the shadow is dominance. Okay? But the gift is synergy. And this is another thing that I think is super important to talk about with it. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But in the city is communion.
Oh.
So it's a really beautiful thing that ends up happening from you transcending just that wiring that you have.
Right.
Right. It's has nothing to, it's not an interpersonal experience with you. Sure, your interpersonal experiences develop the way it shows up in you, but it's predestined. Right. So it's just okay, it's a fucking a part of me. I'm going to accept it.
Absolutely.
And transcend it, you know, for myself, my ancestry, whole shebang. But every shadow has a repressed nature and a reactive nature. So again, if you repress the shadow, you're still in it. What happens with the dominance, if somebody represses this experience of themselves, they become timid. And obviously the reactive is very dominating. And so what I often find more times than not, the people who come to me are very repressed in the dominance. They're a little bit more timid. And so you kind of have to teach them how to allow space for that part of them to come through with still the trust that they can transcend it to synergy. That's the thing, of people don't always want to let it in because they're afraid they're going to get stuck there, or they don't trust themselves, and ultimately they don't feel safe in the experience of it. It's it's crazy. The more work that you do with a shadow, the more you love it, the more safety that you build with it, the more natural it is to be in your gifts. You don't have to try to be in the gifts. The work comes in, how safe can I be in this experience and hold this shadow, then predetermines how the gift will show up.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring for me to dive into this gene key stuff. So I
Yeah.
think we're going to have to carve out some space and go into this. This is really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do you see any correlation or connection between psychedelics and gene keys?
So this is so wild. I started hosting actual groups and teaching it a year ago. And my second group, or my first or second group, I started to have people come to me and they're like, I really want to do mushrooms and contemplate gene keys.
Right.
And I was like, I didn't even think of that. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and I started to tell them, I'm like, be it my guinea pig, do it. Let me know what happens. Because then people were like, I want a retreat with this where we are doing ceremony and contemplating our gene keys. And I'm like, are there enough people who even want that? Like, is this a thing?
Mm-hmm.
But more and more people began to suggest it. And I think it's because gene keys is a very feminine teaching. So it's great to have the medicine like mushrooms that kind of makes you let go of the structure, the identity, in order to tap into more of the energy. Right. The more feminine aspects of reality.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think just based on my own experience with mushrooms and contemplating, deep topics, it can be very, very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Summer, as you know, you're privy to know this, and by the time this podcast is out, hopefully our first legal psychedelic microdose product is on the market. Do you think the world is ready for legal psychedelics, and especially, I guess, in a microdose format? What do you think?
I do. I think that there's enough people, like, it's new to the mainstream, but it's not new to people.
Right.
Like, there definitely are these pockets of communities where people have experienced it. They're familiar with it. They've built that relationship with it. And what happens is I feel like now we have enough leaders, enough guides, enough teachers that understanding how to build right relationship with psychedelics is possible. It's accessible.
Totally.
Without that, could be a who knows, shit show.
Sure.
'Cause it brings up a lot, and without proper integration, like, it can send people into spirals. It can send them into, huge contractions and not knowing how to move through that experience. So I think with all the leaders that we have, the guides, the teachers, the knowledge, the accessibility, like, yeah, let's go.
Beautiful. I love that. Well said. Very well said. Out of curiosity, what is your favorite mushroom?
So, like, functional mushroom?
Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, I love chaga. Oh my gosh. So I'm from Michigan. Forage mushrooms, like, it's just everywhere. And I dated like a super health nerd. God bless him, all the knowledge he brought into my life. And he would buy chaga and we'd drink it as tea in the winter times for immunity.
Wow, yeah.
And it's like a dirt tasting thing, but it tastes so good because it feels good and my body feels the benefits of it. Like,
your body knows.
I really bond with that one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful mushroom, major antioxidant, one of the biggest. I think they call it like the king of mushrooms or something like that. Pretty powerful. Good choice.
Yeah, I have good taste.
Yeah, clearly. Clearly. I'm curious, Summer. You've worked with Eons now for over a year. And it's been quite the journey. You've seen people come and people go. And as you're privy to, we have, some new products coming out, which is exciting, especially for me. And I'm sure you as well. What are you most excited about the future of Eons? And where do you like to see it going?
Yeah. That's great. Some of the things that I really appreciate about Eons is that the company doesn't just talk the talk. Everybody that's on the team literally walks the walk. We live a lifestyle that's on a mission that isn't based in old societal structures of success, right? It's a mission that's it has a vision, right? A bigger vision for humanity. And I see that coming to life. I see it being a bit difficult, to literally pave a new pathway is like, there's some work to do with like, you know, crumbling down old structures to be able to build up a new structure. It takes a lot. It takes devotion. Right?
Amen. Yeah.
Devotion and clarity.
Amen.
Right?
Well said.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Yeah. I see Eons bringing medicine to be accessible. Right. And it's clean. It's intentional as fuck. Like intentional as fuck. Like sure, anybody can come out with like some mushroom products, but the intentionality that's behind Eons is like pristine.
Thank you. Yes, it really is. A lot of energy, a lot of thought, a lot of insights, and really dedication and devotion goes into it. So thank you for saying that, recognizing that. That's really why we started this company, was to bring people closer to their true nature and to humanity. You know, like we see a world where people are connected to themselves and the world around them. And it's been such a blessing having you on the team and working closely together. And I feel like we're just getting started on this new chapter where we're going with legal psychedelics and all the cool, wild stuff that's going to come along with that. You know, obviously we got the protocols in there to keep things in check, and it's a true microdose, you know, for the people just tuning in or maybe unaware of this. It's truly a microdose, a very, very micro dose of this psychedelic that has been tested and studied, and it's fully legal. That's the thing. They've already said it's legal, so we don't have to reinvent something. It's already there, provided by nature, and it works amazing. So really excited for that. I'm curious, Summer, do you have any questions for me or anything that's on the top of your mind or heart that you want to bring up?
Well, I want to finish the thought about the microdosing.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I do have some random questions I could ask you.
Good.
They're totally off topic. You
Sure.
said out of the box.
Sure.
But the microdosing part, I was first introduced to psychedelics in full doses, and what happened is I had a major experience, but a lot of trauma because I didn't have the right environment, facilitator, integration, support, community.
For sure.
None of the right environment for proper integration. What happened is I took a full dose. A lot of visions came online. Didn't realize I was such a visual person until that experience. But then after that, I couldn't, every time I take it, I couldn't go back to that place because there was like trauma there.
Right.
And I slowly started to get back into psychedelics through microdosing. And this was actually something that my facilitator was familiar with, is the trauma that can happen with psychedelics. But what microdosing really taught me was how deep you can go with just a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's so much about surrender and building the relationship to the medicine. And I think that's so beautiful that we're ushering it in with Eons in the microdose so that people can start the relationship. Like, you just want to go on a date with somebody first, right? You don't want to go straight to like making babies with them. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Get to know the medicine, build trust so that you can actually allow yourself to feel the medicine. And it's wild how far a little bit can go. And I had the same type of intensity of visual experiences on a microdose just by learning how to surrender and trust and lean in to the experience and allow it to guide you. That's another thing, is that people nowadays are very self-led, which is important, but what's it like when you allow something that has a higher intelligence, like mushrooms, to lead you? Right? Like, can you be led by it?
Yeah. Beautifully said. Honestly, so well said. And that was a lot of our intentionality around that, was to build safety and trust within the brand so that when people might get the courage to say, okay, you know what? I've heard a lot about this microdosing. I've seen my friend or my cousin or my sister get better. Now I want to try and see how this goes and slowly introduce it to the system gently, very gently, and let the intelligence, like these mushrooms are tapped into innate intelligence. We know that. So it's going to be a really interesting and exciting and inspiring journey that we're on. I'm really stoked to be on this journey with you.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I have one question about business.
Sure.
One about a little bit of like religious, could be tied to the Bible,
Sure.
but just very human. And then another like personal question for you.
Cool. Start with the business.
Start with business.
Yeah.
I figured. Like, what is your perspective on professionalism? Like, I feel like Gen Z, right? Gen Z is like bringing in this whole new wave of like how people show up in the workplace, and so many things are shifting. Yeah, and I feel like I'm on that teeter of like really being a pattern interrupt, but then also like withholding tradition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
That's a great question. And it's a tricky question because, you know, times are always changing, and some things that worked in the past don't work now, but there's some things that worked in the past and may always work, you know, and I think fundamental things, right? So I'd say one of them is the main thing for anybody listening, no matter what generation that you're in, professionalism. The key to like owning professionalism or mastering professionalism is being effective at whatever you do. So that's like a big one. If you just start to dial into effectiveness, read a book around being effective, you know, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, because we're talking about professionalism is a, you know, it's a work ethic. It's a type of work. So it's like in that work, in that professionalism, whatever you're in, you're there because someone is counting on you to be effective at whatever you signed up for, you know? So, and it doesn't really, I get it. There's always special circumstances, and, you know, that's where compassion and empathy come to play. And as a leader of the company, they're going to have to be compassionate and empathetic, or they get to be. And at the same time, they're still looking for that person to try to be as effective as they can. So I would say effectiveness, like no matter what your issue is, what's going on, just showing up to be as effective as you can that day. And sometimes that may vary from day to day, depending what's going on in your life. But the individual just knowing in their heart that, yeah, I was effective as I can be that day. I gave it my best shot. It's a pretty golden rule that you're going to be okay, you know, and, you know, every day is different. But yeah, I'd say effectiveness is a good one. And another one that you just can't go wrong, no matter what generation, Gen Z to Gen X or whatever, is respect. You know, just have respect for people no matter what. And that will save you a lot of drama, and it'll save you a lot of issues, just mutual respect, you know? So I'd say those two, and having the third one that would just take these Gen Zers pretty far is just having a good attitude, you know? Showing up that's one thing that you can control. There's a lot of things you can't control in the world, most things, but just showing up with a positive attitude, good energy, even if it's overly positive, that's okay. Just have a good attitude, because people are not going to want to be around the opposite of that. You know, like, and I get it, you know, there's being authentic, there's being transparent of what's going on in your life, but there's always a way to spin it for something that you can be grateful for, and then that could fuel the right attitude.
Yeah, I love that, because you're really speaking to like the qualities and like values. You know, I think I got tripped up for a while, just growing up naturally like rebellious, just did not want to do anything typical. Like getting tripped up on how professionalism is supposed to look. Right. And like feeling like judged by that. But it only allows you to like kind of anchor into those qualities and values even more. So I think that's cool.
Yeah. Good question. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah. Next one is, and I will admittedly, shamelessly bring this in as like, I struggle with temptation. And I know
I think we all do.
Right? And I know it's spoken in the Bible, and things are so shiny, like shiny object syndrome, like, oh my gosh. And I see you as being a very clear, discerning person. And I've heard some of your stories, but honestly, just bringing up your thoughts on temptation in general.
Yeah, temptation is a tough one. I would say my own personal experience with temptation, like I still face temptation all the time. You know, I was in Miami last week, and you know, it's like Temptation Island over there. It's like just beautiful people everywhere, beautiful women, beautiful cars, and it just looks like the pinnacle of the hedonistic lifestyle that I used to live. You know, that was my life for a long time, was just hedonism and pleasure and enjoyment and fun and living for the now. And it was awesome. I had a lot of fun, but I also took that so far like I often do. I go all in. And I took that so far that I saw really the true essence of what that lifestyle gives. And it's really not fulfilling. So, and, maybe this is somewhere in the gene keys. I'd love to find out. But I've had the sense and the energy of fulfillment in certain things that I've done in life and achieved in life. And it's just on a totally different, it's like the opposite of where the stuff that temptation goes. So I guess because I've had to touch that stove so many times and got burnt, so to speak, that it's like, it's not as tempting anymore. It's tempting to the eye. But then if I play out the story in my mind of where this temptation will lead to, whatever the case may be, it's like, I know where that leads to. And I'm very familiar with that feeling. So I just shifted back to, what can I do that's very fulfilling? What can I do to bring me to wellness? So that's how I manage temptation.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like really seeing how surface level temptation can be, right? And not like the deep fulfillment that you're, that is required, right?
Totally.
For fulfillment.
Shiny object syndrome, it's just like, it's shiny and it looks great. But once you've had it, you realize like, that's not the thing. That's just it's kind of a trick. So the other things is oftentimes things money can't buy are just, just the most fulfilling things. And fulfillment is a really awesome feeling that I like to bask in as much as we can.
Yeah. And it actually is seen in gene keys if you look at your purpose sphere or if you look at your pearl sphere.
Oh, I've heard of this pearl thing.
Yeah, amazing. You'd love the pearl sequence. It's all about the energetics of business and running like an ecosystem.
Cool.
Being in our gifts and our inner calling. And the purpose sphere is a little bit more of like an ancestral, personal, deep fulfillment. And it's fascinating because yours, I believe, the shadow is addiction. But the gift is, it could be invention.
Oh, cool. That makes total sense.
Exactly. So it's like when you talk about that, I'm like, You're like, maybe it relates to gene keys. I'm like,
Yeah. Shocker. No, it totally does. I've been addicted to things in my life. Cannabis was a huge addiction. Alcohol, sex, So, and then I haven't been addicted to those things in quite some time. And in that time, I've just been inventing things for eons. So pretty cool. Gene keys is real. Awesome.
Yeah. And then the pearl sequence is like a cosmic fulfillment. It's like mind, body, soul fulfillment. Then it also can show you how to have right relationship with money to your design.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll have to dive into this. This is good stuff, Summer.
I know. It's really fun. My last question is, what is one thing that this is a personal one.
Sure.
What is one thing that you find yourself avoiding? Like even after all this work you've done, you've grown so much. Like, do you find yourself avoiding things?
Man, that's a good question. Yeah, I'd say, sometimes this is going to be very honest and open and vulnerable, but sometimes I avoid talking to some of my old friends that I grew up with. Great guys. I love them. I'll always love them, have a place in my heart. And I look forward to, new versions of that friendship one day. But sometimes I avoid talking to them or reaching out to them because I haven't beat the game yet. And I want to beat the game and then talk to them and be like, see, I told you I was going to beat the game, So,
wait, what do you mean the game?
Well, I see life as like a game,
right?
And I've talked about this in podcasts and with my friends, of course. But it's just a mindset shift that makes this whole Earth experience more fun, and it's more playful and more creative. And then it shifted me out from a survival mindset to a co-creator mindset, by seeing this as a game. And I know that may hurt some people's feelings because life is a lot more complex than just a game. And I get that. But this is just my own personal mindset shift that makes things a lot more fun. And I don't take things as seriously because I definitely have a habit of doing that. Gene keys, I'm sure.
Yeah, another one of your gene key shadows, seriousness.
For sure. I already knew that was coming. So, the gamification thing, Definitely, it plays a factor. And so, yeah, I've been saying for a while this, and I'll share this with you. I've been saying for a while, like, I'm in the game, and people ask me, Alex, how you doing? And there's ups and downs in life. And just like there's ups and downs in the game, sometimes you're winning, sometimes you're losing. So I've been very much in that in the game mindset. And then recently I shifted it to, yeah, I'm in the game, but I'm going to break the game. And and I will. And I won't stop until I break the game. And fun story, on the weekend, I went out with our mutual friend Dane. And he's like, do you want to know where we're going, or keep it a surprise? I'm like, just keep it a surprise. Let's keep it fun, So he brought us to Dave & Buster's. Fun. It's like an arcade for adults. And we go straight to the basketball game. And in my mindset, I played basketball my whole childhood and teenage, college, and all this stuff. So in my mindset, I'm like, okay, I'm not just in the game, I'm going to break the game. So we start playing basketball, and literally I was just on fire. Like, I couldn't miss, and I ended up breaking the game. Like, it couldn't go any higher. High score, I reached the high score, and I just kept getting bonus time. And Dane was freaking out. He's like, what the heck? You broke the game. And I was like, I did, because that was my mindset. So that's why, to my old friends listening, Kyle and Mike and Vito and Steve and Tony, sometimes I don't reach out to them, not because I don't love them. I love them. They played a big factor in my growing up and who I am. But I'm wanting to beat the game before I really tap in with them. That's just, yeah.
I'm still so curious about this.
Yeah. Well, you'll hear a lot more about it. This is the new mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Alex on the other side of breaking the game.
Yeah. That's it.
Who then doesn't avoid his childhood friends.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll see them and talk to them again soon. It's my birthday's coming up, so I'm sure I'll talk to them.
Yeah,
but
a little bit.
I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about what I've been avoiding, but that was one thing I have been avoiding. So thank you for bringing that up. There's something there.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, Summer, what's anything else? You've shared some amazing codes today, some wonderful wisdoms around gene keys, astrology, and psychedelics, and all kinds of good stuff. As you know, we talk about codes a lot, Ryan and I especially. I'm wondering if you had one code that you could share with the audience that's really impacted your life, and or you'd want to put out there for people. What is that code?
Yeah. Something that's been really raw and alive in my heart, in my life, and my soul's path is breaking free from the hyper-independence. Being too defined in the individual. So many people live in little boxes, right? We've seen it, like little boxes all by themselves. They're cooking for themselves, cleaning for themselves, getting their food for themselves. And it's so against our biology. And something that I've been leaving space for, bringing into conversations, is receiving support. Like, we are the medicine. It's all within. Cool. And like, great. There's a lot of truth to that. And what's it like to receive support from herbs, from people, from my glasses?
Right. Yeah.
I'm such a stubborn person. I wanted to fix my eyesight so bad. And then one day I was like, what if I just receive support and wear my glasses if I can't see very well?
Right.
And seeing how much shifts in our energy and in my health, and just bringing back that balance.
It's a great code, because it's only up to us to ask for support, right? Like, I'm sure people can offer support, and here in Austin, people are actually pretty great at saying, hey, what can I support you with? Which feels really nice. But I've learned that as well, is to like, okay, if I don't ask for support, then how am I really going to get it, right? And I just wait for someone to ask me. So that's a really good code, a reminder that it's okay, and it's sometimes even more than okay to have a season of independence, and solitude can be very healing, but don't make it a lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, community is wonderful, and support is wonderful. So that's a really good reminder. I appreciate you sharing that. Summer, this has been awesome. Is there anything else that's alive in your heart that you want to share before we sign off?
I feel complete.
Okay, awesome. For people that want to learn more about astrology, gene keys, all things Summer Phoenix, where can they find you?
Instagram is my little hub. Maybe one day I'll get on YouTube, but yeah, on Instagram.
Summer Phoenix?
It's Summer Phoenix.
It's Summer Phoenix. There we go.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much, Summer. It's been a blast, and I look forward to many more adventures together.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.